So the story which promotes higher education in Africa hasn't been the same because we've had great personalities behind the scene pushing the agenda through the World Bank and a whole lot. Have you heard about the ACE Impact Project, which is also promoting and advancing the quality and quantity of postgraduate studies in Africa? And you know what? There is an amazing personality behind this amazing cause trying to drive the agenda. She is with the World Bank and she's a senior educational specialist. Her focal areas that she's supporting in is higher education, women in STEM, and also digital skills. And another thing about her is that she is also with the Education Global Practice Unit in the World Bank. So you know what? Stay with me, don't go anywhere. I'll let you know who she is, and we'll just try to walk her through her achievements. Close to 10 years with the World Bank. Stay with us. Right back. Welcome back, and it's AAU Talks, the voice of higher education in Africa. My name is Ajiman Ochodako, and earlier I was telling you about this amazing personality, alright, who's with the World Bank. And you know, before she got there, she was a Wall Street person. You know what I mean by Wall Street? Figures, right, stock price and all that. And her background is electricals engineering. So I asked myself, what happened? In the studio is Dr. Ekua Bentil. Doc, you're welcome to AAU Talks.
Thank you for having me.
Doc, it actually gives me so much joy to read about your background and ask myself, it is possible if you give your mind to it. And I want to begin with a little about your background and how you ended up with the World Bank, and then you stuck there. You didn't go anywhere else. What happened?
So that's a very interesting question. And I get that a lot because even people within the World Bank would usually ask me, what are you doing here? You should probably be working with an energy company. But, you know, when I graduated with my PhD in electrical engineering in the US, one of the things that I always held dear, and I even participated in that as part of my PhD program, was to work with students in Ghana, actually. So I supervised master students at the University of Cape Coast in the physics department there. So I always had this urge to support higher education in Africa. I also grew up in a family of educators. My mother was an English teacher and my father a physics professor. So I always grew up on university campus, saw the labs, and I also was at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology for 1 year before I left Ghana. And so there was a huge contrast that I saw with my experience in the US, having gone through undergraduate, master's, and PhD in the US setting versus what I saw in Ghana growing up. And so I always had that urge to hopefully one day come back and do something differently within the higher education sector, but I didn't know what it was. So after I graduated with my PhD, I got recruited onto Wall Street. So I worked at Goldman Sachs for about 3.5 years in New York. And during that time, you know, it was a good learning step for me, but I realized that wasn't my calling. I knew there was something more I wanted to do. So I started speaking to various mentors in my life. I went back to Princeton University where I did my master's and PhD, spoke to professors there that I knew to get their opinion in terms of me wanting to give back to Africa. What things could I do to get there? And through many steps, I was at a UN conference, got introduced to a manager at the time who was at this event at the UN institution, at the UN headquarters, in New York. And she said, you know, you can come and talk to me at the World Bank. And she said, send me your resume. And I did. And lo and behold, I got there. She spoke to me a little bit, heard about my passion. I spoke to a few of her team members, and she said, I want you on my team. And I had always, as I said before, wanted to make an impact in the region. And I had this dream of, you know, setting up my own center, sort of to what I lead now. That was very self-contained with places for researchers to sleep, childcare, restaurant, the labs, everything in there to support research in Africa. And I did semiconductor devices in terms of my training. So I wanted to do something in that. But when I got to the World Bank, they were trying to, at that point, improve applied science, engineering, technology in higher education in Africa. So it was just in alignment of what, I was looking to do. And so, leaving Wall Street was not that difficult of a decision for me to take. Although it was a huge step of faith, to go from Wall Street to the World Bank, because I started off as a consultant in the World Bank.
Okay.
But I knew that it was my calling to some degree, and I didn't know for how long, but I knew at that point in time that was a step of faith that I had to take and jump right in. So that's how I went from Wall Street to World Bank.
It definitely should be calling. And 2015, close to 10 years in the World Bank. How has it been like to be in the World Bank?
It's been an interesting journey and a good journey of growth, right? So a lot of times you can have passion, but you also can't do it alone. You always need champions along the way to help you along. So my success at the World Bank has been because I had people who looked out for me in terms of certain managers that I worked with, and even colleagues, peers that I worked with. And I had to learn to be a leader. I tend to really work hard and not delegate, do everything on my own because I can, and I stay up late and all of that. But I think at the World Bank, I got to learn how to be a leader, and one that was not inward focused, but also cared about the people I work with beyond the work that they are doing. And so I think that was very important. And also to learn about development, because obviously I came from a very different background, coming to the World Bank and applying myself and learning about the sector. When it comes to education, everybody feels like, so long as they've gone to school, they can solve problems in education. So it makes it very difficult to try to change people's mind on certain issues. But I knew I had to learn a lot from people I worked with. I had to read a lot to understand not just the Africa context, but also what other countries have done to improve their own higher education systems and the links between the different education sectors. Primary education through secondary education through higher education, there's a link there. And understanding that is very, very important. So it's been a journey, but a good one and a fulfilling one, in terms of the people I work with and the work I've been doing and seeing the impact on the ground. So zero regrets.
Sure. We'll be looking into some of the very important findings that you actually came across, focusing on Africa and trying to improve its educational prowess. But let's go back to what it entailed being a senior educational specialist and also being with the Education Global Practice team. What exactly did it entail for you to look at three focal areas: women in STEM, digital skills, and higher education? Were there more that you chose to do three? How was it like?
So I think, as I indicated, when I started off at the World Bank, there was this initiative called Partnership for Skills in Applied Science, Engineering, and Technology. And it was just starting off. And so there were various initiatives on data in higher education, on developing a regional scholarship and innovation fund. So that's where I started off. And women, when it comes to women in STEM, I'm a woman first off, and having gone through, my education, it's clear that we have very few women, particularly in engineering, which I focused on throughout my education. And knowing that, we can work hard at helping women participate more in these fields where we have fewer and fewer of them participating, particularly knowing where the world is going, right? So, and all of this is still linked to the whole digital economy for Africa when you think about, or even globally, right? Now we have AI, taking over the world in so many different ways and impacting all the different sectors. So when it comes to the STEM agenda, Africa has always been playing catch up. And I always tell people it's not because we lack brains, we lack the intelligence, it's because of lack of resources, right? And you see, when you go all over the world, you find Africans doing amazing work in STEM fields, from women, and both women and men, right? So it's about providing and supporting colleagues working in Africa in these steps, in terms of ensuring that there's funding for reagents, for labs, for lecture rooms, and all of those things, for scholarships, right? To ensure that people get the opportunities that they need to go up to their full potential. And so those are things that have always been passionate about. And so within the higher education space, I think no country can develop if its higher education sector is weak, right? So whether it comes to training of STEM teachers to go back and teach in the secondary school, to build a pipeline that would flow into the higher education sector, you need strong higher education institutions to be in place. This whole discussion about AI research, where else can it happen more? Or training students to end up being better data scientists or AI specialists, students that can do machine learning, experts that are in all of these fields, robotics and all of that. Where else than the higher education sector? So all of these things are really linked, and that's why I'm passionate about it. And higher education impacts all other sectors, right? Whether it's around training of teachers, whether it's around training people who work in the energy sector, even agriculture. How do we develop crop varieties that are climate resistant, and all of those things? Water. Most of the Sahel region, the water is underground, deep underground. How do you work with researchers in being able to have access to this water in an environment that is very dry, right? So all of these things, you need people being trained in the higher education sector. And for example, one sector that I'm also very passionate about is the mining sector, right? These days, there's a whole lot of discussion about green minerals. When you look at the energy transition to green energy, and how Europe and Asia and all of those other continents will be looking to Africa to a great extent in terms of the green minerals that we have in Africa that are needed for batteries and all of that. So if we don't develop the workforce in Africa along the value chain, right? For example, in mining, then we're going to see minerals just leaving the continent in their rawest forms, basic forms, and the value is not being added to that. So higher education plays a very strong role in the region. That's why I've always cared about it. And there's a lot of work also that we need to do in Africa. This not to say that basic education, secondary education are not good, because we need those pipelines to feed into the higher education. But we need to do all that in parallel, because there's no way as a continent, if we leave our higher education and research areas struggling, that we can develop.
And there's a whole lot to talk about. It's getting interesting right here. Dr. Ekua Bentil's profile can't be actually said without saying the ACE Impact project. It's one big project that the World Bank had actually done in Sub-Saharan Africa, the first biggest. So we'll go for a bit. We'll come back. We'll get to know more about her role, okay, all within the ACE Impact project. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
Hello Africa is a live breakfast show that aims to give you, our viewers, an informative, entertaining, and energizing start to your day. This isn't just another news show. It takes the form of vibrant magazine packed with news reviews, lifestyle features, engaging interviews, and interactive segments that put you at the center of the action.
All you have to do is grab your coffee, get comfortable, and join us for the Hello Africa morning show. We are here to kickstart your day with the news and stories that matter to you, alongside all the fun and inspiration we crave.
Every morning, join us for
the latest headlines in African higher education, science, and
quick and informative newspaper and online news review,
lifestyle tips on fitness, nutrition, fashion, and beauty,
inspiring interviews with influential figures and everyday heroes,
performances and interactive contests, and so much more.
In Ethiopia, Salam Africa.
In North Africa, Alan Afrikia.
In Swahili, Jambo Africa.
Tune in every Monday from 8 a.m. to 10 o'clock GMT. Join us to make it a fantastic day together.
Hello Africa, your daily connection to the continent.
So we are right back over here at AAU TV studios. My name is Ajay Chodak with AAU Talks, the voice of higher education in Africa. And right here is Dr. Ekua Bentil, senior education specialist at the World Bank. And before we went for break, I wanted to hear from you what exactly it means to be a senior education specialist. What does it mean to be that?
Yeah, so the education specialist role at the World Bank is basically working with governments to help them design interventions to solve, the challenges that they have across the different subsectors in education.
Okay.
And so we have colleagues that work in, early childhood, colleagues that work in basic education, secondary education, higher education, so the whole stretch, TVET. And so our role is to really help governments access funding, whether it's through World Bank loans, grants, or trust funds from other donors that provide us with trust funds to support our countries. So we help them in designing different interventions to solve various challenges in the education sector. And then when it comes to the implementation of those programs and interventions, we work closely with them to ensure that the programs are successful, the interventions are successful, whether it's pilots or system changes. We work with them along that process to help them be successful and achieve the objectives of those programs.
Okay. All right, Doc. And today we can never talk about the storyline of higher education's progress in Africa without talking about the African Center of Excellence for Development Impact project. This project is an encircling figure within the space, advancing the quality and quantity of postgraduate studies within the continent. You were there or you were not there. How was this project born? And what role did you play from its inception to this point?
So, the ACE story, how sometimes we say that it takes a village, right? It's one of those stories.
Yeah.
And no one person, I believe, can take credit for all of the success that we've seen in ACE, right? So I can speak within the context of the World Bank, but we've had African governments that have really championed this effort. We've had the center leaders that have really worked so hard to ensure that they're getting the maximum amount of funding that have been allocated to them. I've had, within the World Bank country managers, country directors, vice presidents, managers, task team leaders within the different countries that we work with. So we have colleagues that started, thinking about the ACE, the Africa Center of Excellence initiative. I think from what I've been told, around 2012, right, where they realized the need to really start investing in the region. And at that point, there wasn't too much happening in the higher education space in terms of the World Bank's portfolio.
Yes.
Because there's just so much that also had to be done in the other subsectors of the world of education in Africa. But there were, some key champions like Dr. Peter Materu. He's now currently at Mastercard Foundation.
Okay.
And I had other colleagues like Andreas Blom at the World Bank who worked closely together and with the support of, like I said, VPs within the World Bank and other managers, to say, how can we change the narrative in Africa? So they worked on the first series of the ACE project in designing it. And I know there's another colleague, Himdat Bayusuf, also, at least on the west side, who also worked closely with the team on that. So when I joined the World Bank, they had already started ACE 1, which was the first in the series of ACE projects. And I was able to work with the team on that. And when I continued to work with the team, I got to meet all these amazing country co-leads, right? So because we work in the different countries, we have co-leads, colleagues that work in all of these countries. So it was, amazing to see the support from these colleagues as well. And then while there, we're told, because ACE 1 is doing so well, ACE 2 needs to, for Eastern and Southern Africa. So ACE 1 was for Western Central Africa. So the idea of working on ACE 2 also came up for Eastern and Southern Africa. So I got to work a little bit on that as well. And then in 2018, we started thinking about, okay, ACE 1 is wrapping up, but that cannot be the end, right? It doesn't take 5 years to develop a center of excellence. And so what's next? So we started thinking about what would go into the next in the series. And ACE Impact was born. We had various consultations with governments and colleagues even within the World Bank in the different sectors to develop terms of reference for what centers will be applying for in terms of short courses, in terms of master's and PhD programs, in terms of the research, applied research that they'll be doing. And we worked together as a team, and it was developed closely with the government, and that's how ACE Impact, the third in the series, came about. So I had the privilege of working on ACE 1, ACE 2, and then ACE Impact, so all three. And I became the team lead for a while. I worked on it alone. And then I have a colleague working with me closely as well. So it's been nice seeing the progression and seeing how from the various series we've progressed through.
Amazing. All right, Doc. So currently 53 centers, 11 countries, Sub-Saharan Africa. What can you term the success story of the ACE Impact project currently?
That's a very difficult question. And actually, we've recently added one more center in Djibouti on climate change. So now we have 54. So that's, 54. So we do have a lot of centers that we work with. And the success stories, I think it's a lot, and I don't think we can finish them all here. Okay. But I think fundamentally, what we've seen as the success story is, having centers that did not exist before, right? And programs that did not exist before being developed in Africa, which, are making great impact in the lives of young people. in terms of their own training, but also impacting the community, whether it's around reproductive health, maternal health for mothers, reducing deaths, once they give birth, whether it's around crop improvement, whether it's around genetic medicine, whether it's around sustainable mining. All of these different sectors where we really need to build capacity around research, and also just having a highly skilled crop of the workforce in Africa being developed. We've seen these numbers, and we would have loved to have it scale massively. The numbers are not small, but I think there's still room for scaling in terms of these centers that have amazing labs and infrastructure to get the work done, to train, to do good research. And for me, that's the first step in the right direction. So I think over the past 10 years or so, that's something that we've been successful in doing. And I'm not saying that all 54 of our centers, are way up here, but I think we've made strides in several areas in that sense.
Another important area is the issue of gender inequity and equality, with the fact that we have so many women here in Africa who haven't got a chance to pursue some of these scientific, technology, engineering, mathematics programs. How has the World Bank's ACE Impact project narrowed the gap? I mean, this is a very, very awful story.
Yeah. So, first of all, the pipeline is still weak right now. We are starting off from the master's and PhD level for most of our centers, right? So we are not targeting the undergraduates for majority of the centers. So what that means is that we are working with whatever the pipeline is. But at the very least, what we've encouraged the centers to do is to really do a lot of outreach. Some have provided women with great accommodation, particularly women with families in some of our centers. Some centers have created daycare centers to support women with children, little children. Some have provided amazing maternity leave packages. And we incentivize them by paying more. If you bring in a woman, for example, a woman PhD student from another country, you get more money than bringing in a male from your own country. And because it's a results-based project, which means that we need to see the results, they are verified, and you get money. So we've allocated money to student enrollment, and we're able to incentivize them to bring in more women in that sense, so that we're paying more for every woman that they bring in than for the men. And to retain the women, we've had these centers do all these other things that I listed earlier to ensure that these women are retained in their programs. In addition, we have most of our centers, deputy center leaders, and some center leaders that are women. So that leadership aspect, I think, is important, which was not the case within our first series of ACE, but ACE Impact, we've been able to increase that number. And for women in science, in STEM fields, role models, and seeing leaders that look like you are very important. So I think that aspect too has been very good. And then we also have a sexual harassment policy that at the beginning of the project, we had every center develop to ensure that, if anything should happen in that space, those impacted, whether male or female, had an avenue to report. And we know that sexual harassment issues can be a major stumbling block for women, particularly in spaces where there are fewer of them. So, these are just a few examples of what we've done within the program to improve this.
Awesome. And undoubtedly, I know you've touched many lives, males, females, within the area of STEM and all other disciplines through the ACE Impact project. Someone will be thinking about, how sustainable is this project? Where are we taking this? And is it going to end abruptly, or there is going to be a continuity paradigm? What was the plan?
So that's a good question, and a question that we get asked a lot, right? From government, from the centers, even within the World Bank. That what's next? I think one thing that is clear is obviously the World Bank cannot fund ACE forever, but also the question is it the right time to stop funding ACE, right? One thing that we've been thinking about is having a differentiated approach. Once, if as we think about what's next, the centers that have had 10 years of support, where do we see them? What's the next level for them, right? Is it same old kind of interventions that they need? I don't think so. There are centers in some sectors that need more help than others. There are some sectors that in the past in the region have had more funding support than others. So how do we have a differentiated approach as we think about the next phase? So there's a lot of interest in doing something more because the model has worked well. But unfortunately, I cannot sit here and say what exactly it will be and when it will be. But we know that the success of ACE is speaking for itself in all of our meetings. And so there's interest, within the World Bank to think about doing more within the higher education space, whether it's through some national projects, but also regional interventions. Yeah.
I've been looking forward to ask this question about taking a look back 10 years through the inception of the ACE Impact Project to today. Can you say that the ACE Impact Project was well built and given all the attention it needed to attend to the educational and development needs of the African continent, particularly Sub-Saharan Africa, and there wouldn't be a need to bring anything else? Can you say that?
I don't think we can say that. I don't think we are completely there yet on the continent, right? And so there is still a lot of work to do. And if you think about it, the ACEs, although we've tried to ensure that they're integrated within the university system, when you go to visit the universities, the ACEs tend to be the beacon, right, at the university in terms of having well-equipped labs and facilities for teaching and learning, and they're able to generate a lot of funding to the university and all of that. But how about the other, other departments and other supports that are needed within the university system? I know sometimes even if you look at the procurement systems within the universities, you look at the internet connectivity within it, right? So there are other things, enabling elements that are needed to ensure that the region is truly there or has arrived yet. So I think the ACE program is a step in the right direction, an initial step, and can be scaled, right, massively. We know what works and what doesn't work. We've learned a lot throughout the past 10 years. And so, what does that mean moving forward, right? And inviting, other, whether it's development partners or industry partners especially, coming on board and supporting the higher education sector, because all these graduates and research, it has great impact on industry. So I think we have a lot of work to do in that respect, and also in terms of translational research and going from commercialization of research, right, of our centers and the work they're doing. All of those areas are very weak on the continent, even within our centers. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in that respect. And some sectors, like I said, they've been starved for a long time in the region, and those are still much weaker and would need more support and funding for those sectors.
And congratulations on your transition. You served so well, undoubtedly, and now to something else. And right within your own decks, and as you think into the future and supporting higher education in Africa, what is Dr. Ekua Bentil's main passion that she wants to pursue? maybe, for the African continent?
So I think what I'd really love to see is that we don't lose the gains that we've had over the past 10 years, but that we can build on those going forward. And to a point where Africa no longer plays a catch-up game, particularly if you look at the different industrial revolutions that we've had, we're always, trying to get there, and before we blink, another industrial revolution. And now these industrial revolutions are coming much faster rate than in the past. So there's an urgency for us to really sit up. And I get worried sometimes, but I think more and more people are seeing that Africa can, and Africa can feed itself. Africa can, have, develop researchers in all of its different sectors, and highly skilled workforce in all of these different sectors. We just have to put the money there towards it and the support to make it happen, and it's possible. So yeah, we have still a lot of work to do, and I think in my own way, I will continue to support, my colleagues that work in Africa as best as I can with every opportunity that I have. So,
Dr. Ekua Bentil, you are indeed an incredible role model. I appreciate your impact thus far, and I believe that other people out there appreciate your contribution, and perhaps follow your steps and try and look back at their continent and give their all. That's what time affords us on AAU Talks, the voice of higher education in Africa. We're glad that you came by
and that
you shared all this refreshing conversation. I'd like to have it again and again and again. All right, so once we come your way again with AAU Talks, the voice of higher education in Africa, my name is Ajiman Ochodako. Be safe. Bye.